Well, hello and welcome back. We are almost done with our second book of the New Testament, so let's jump right in with our review of Acts 22 to 26. For our four review questions, I want to look at the events right around chapter 23. Paul has been arrested and he's in the custody of Roman guards, and it's discovered that the Jews are forming a plot to kill Paul before he leaves town. The Jews have sworn an oath to one another that they will not eat or drink anything until Paul is dead. But their plot's found out, and Paul is safely smuggled out of town by the Roman guards. It's quite a story. So, given our four questions, what does this passage say about God? Notice that God uses the Roman guards to carry out his plan to save Paul. These are people who don't believe in God at all, and yet God still uses them to move his plan forward. So I wonder, what does this say about God's sovereignty over world events? How might God still be using people who don't even believe in him today to carry out his plan? Second question, what does this passage say about people, including me? The Jews swear an oath not to eat or drink anything until they've killed Paul. So they're using a religious practice, fasting, in order to carry out their own selfish desires. So I have to ask, in what ways might people today, including me, use religion to achieve our own goals instead of God's? It is possible. Third question, if this is really God's word, what changes would I have to make in my life? Notice that in this whole sequence, Paul is not active. He's very passive. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't make any decisions. He's just along for the ride. Is there any area in my life where I'm trying to exert control over a situation when maybe I just need to acknowledge that I'm along for the ride? And the fourth question, who am I going to tell about what I've read today? Who in my life needs to know that God is still at work in their life, maybe in ways they can't see? Who needs to know that God is still carrying out his plan, even if he's doing it through events that may seem difficult at the time? All right, let's now do our preview of the reading ahead. We have a couple more chapters in Acts, and then we're in the book of Hebrews. So in Acts chapter 27, Paul boards a ship as a prisoner headed for Rome. They set sail in winter, and because of the bad weather, this results in a shipwreck. Incredibly, it's the prisoner Paul who keeps a level head during the shipwreck and helps everybody get to shore safely. And in chapter 28, they are finally washed ashore on the island of Malta, where Paul continues to do miracles, which astounds his guards. And then finally, Paul reaches Rome. There, he again meets up with some Jews who live there in Rome. Apparently, word about Jesus has already reached them there, and Paul wants to help them understand how it could be that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. Now, when we leave Paul at the end of the book of Acts, he's under house arrest in Rome, and we're told he stayed there for 2 years preaching the gospel. Interestingly, we're not told anything about Paul's trial. Many scholars believe that Paul was vindicated at this trial, that he was found innocent, and he continued his evangelistic work for some time after this. It wouldn't be until years later that he returns to Rome and he's martyred along with the Apostle Peter. Now, regardless of what happened, I think there's a reason we're not told. And it's because the point of the book of Acts is not what happens with Paul. The point of the book of Acts is what happens with the gospel. At the start of the book, Jesus promised that the disciples would be his witnesses to the very ends of the earth. And in their minds back then, the ends of the earth meant Rome. And so what we have here is the book of Acts coming full circle. Jesus' prophecy about the spread of the gospel has come true. So whatever happened to those involved, that is secondary to the fact that the gospel will not be stopped. That's the point of the book of Acts. Okay, now it's time to shift gears and move into the book of Hebrews. You started your reading plan with the Gospel of Mark and the book of Acts, which are narratives. They're full of stories. The book of Hebrews, on the other hand, is a letter written to a church, or maybe even a sermon. Now, we believe it was written or given to Jewish Christians living in or around Jerusalem, hence the name Hebrews. Hebrews was written to help these Jewish Christians make connections between the law of God in the Old Testament and the revelation of Jesus. The point is also to encourage them to remain steadfast in their faith. It seems they were facing some persecution from fellow Jews for their decision to follow Jesus, and so the writer reminds them that the benefits of following Jesus far outweigh anything they had under the Old Covenant. That's why in chapter 1 of Hebrews, it is full of Old Testament scriptures. And if you don't quite understand the meaning of all these scriptures, that's okay. Use your study Bible if you'd like. But just know the author is attempting to connect the old with the new. Then chapter 2 starts with a warning about falling away. It seems those Jewish Christians have drifted away from the gospel and wandered back into life under the law. This was the easy way out under persecution. But the author of the book wants them to know that Jesus is a far better version of everything that they had before. He's a better Moses. He's a better Sabbath rest. He's a better high priest, a better temple. He's a better sacrifice. And whatever they had under the old covenant, they have even a better version in Jesus under the new. So in chapter 3, you have an explanation of how Jesus is a better Moses, leading his people to true freedom, not just from freedom from slavery in Egypt, but freedom from sin and death. As for all those other things of which Jesus is a better version, we will get into that next week, and I'm excited to go there with you. So, God bless you in your reading this week. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll see you in a week. Take care.